Hey everybody, welcome to the Conscious Love Show. Whether you are single, you are in a relationship, or you're healing a broken heart, this show is here to inspire you, to remind you how beautiful, lovable, and amazing you truly are, and to give you the practical tools and insights to navigate from wherever you are right now to the loving relationship that you so deeply want to have. My name is Shane Kohler. I'm a certified transformational coach and trainer with over a decade experience helping people release their trauma and open their hearts to love. I've delivered seminars all over the world, coached thousands of people through my online platforms and programs, and every week I'm coming straight to you with the hottest insights and the best teachers around, bringing you powerful resources and profound conversations to heal your relationship with love, dating, and yourself. I'm so grateful you're here, and if it's your first time, welcome. You can count on me to always show up for you with my very best and a commitment to learn and grow myself so I can serve you to my maximum ability. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. I've got some awesome things planned for you today. So without further ado, let's dive in. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Love Show podcast. Shane Kohler on. Pleasure as always. Happy to be back with you this week. Today we are diving into entry number 3 of Shane's diary. So if you've been with me in the last couple of episodes, welcome back. If you're tuning in to Shane's diary for the first time, then welcome. This is a little bit different from my normal content. So what I've wanted to do is include once a month a little diary entry in the podcast. And this is just an opportunity for me to share more of my personal story, my personal insights, lessons, experiences, the things I write about in my journal, right? The things that I sit around and think about when I'm just by myself in my own mind and my own thoughts, and reflecting on my journey, reflecting on how I got to where I am today, reflecting on the things I've been through, my spiritual insights, my relationship insights. But rather than just showing up every week and giving advice to you, I thought once a month I could take some time and share a little bit about my personal story. So again, if you've caught up on Shane's diary number 1 and Shane's diary number 2, then welcome to diary number 3. If you're just tuning into this for the first time, you may want to go back and listen to 1 and 2 so you're getting the full scope, or you may just want to listen to this today. And if after this you feel like going back and listening to 1 and 2, you can do that as well. So whatever feels right for you. But I wanted to today talk about my journey to love, and really the journey from maybe really even a very, very young child to where I am today, to how I met my wife, to ultimately having the family that I have today. Because it has been a journey. And I think, anybody who knew me when I was younger, you would have probably voted me like least likely to succeed. Least likely to succeed in my career, in my relationships, like really across the board. Like I was a hot fucking mess. And I want to start by saying that because I hope that today, wherever you are, however challenged or hopeless you might be feeling, I want you to know that I've been there and am still there sometimes, right? And when I take on a new evolution in some area of my life, it usually starts with a feeling of hopelessness. And then I develop resilience and strength and discipline and perseverance, and I push myself through. And then sometimes things change along the way, right? But just if you're in a place right now, and I think we've all been there, where you're feeling hopeless, you're feeling helpless, you're feeling stuck, and it might seem impossible to get from where you are right now to where you would want to be in your love life or in some other area of your life. I hope that this episode can offer you some hope and some power, and to know that you can pick yourself up. Like now is a new moment where you can start right now, and you can do the next right thing today and the next right thing tomorrow and the next right thing after that. And your experience will quickly start to change. You'll start to feel differently about yourself. You'll start to attract differently in your life. You'll start to seize and take advantage of possibilities that you wouldn't have if you were feeling hopeless and helpless. And what starts to shift over time is there's a compounding effect where your life just gets better and better and better. And so Some of you have been doing that for a long time already. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Some of you maybe not, but I hope that wherever you are today, that this episode can inspire you and elevate you and give you hope and the willingness to believe in a vision that you have, whether that's a vision for love or a vision for some other area of your life. And that this episode can inspire you to go after that. And like I said, I was least likely to succeed, right? Like, I think that's, and I can't stress that enough, like how unlikely to succeed I was. And in the domain of love, in the domain of my career, in the domain of really any life area. I mean, I was getting fired from like delivering pizzas. That's how incompetent I was, right? So like, I was in a really, really bad place. And it wasn't easy to turn things around. It wasn't easy to go from where I was to where I am today, but it's possible. And it really just started by me choosing to do the next right thing every single day. And so I want to share a little bit about what that journey was like for me. And I want to share specifically in the domain of love, because that's what this podcast is about. And, you know, I can talk about my career growth. I can talk about, many different things. And maybe I will weave some of that in today, but because this is the Conscious Love Show and because we're talking about love, I really want to talk about today how I've grown in the domain of love, how I went from really devastating heartbreak in my younger years. Not proud to say this, but like literally on my hands and knees, bawling my eyes out saying, "Don't leave me." And it probably my most shameful moment, right? To really being in a healthy, loving relationship that's, you know, my wife and I have been together almost 10 years now. We have a child, we have a family, we have a happy home. Something that I didn't really think was possible, or something that I thought I had missed my opportunity for. And so I just want to start by sharing a few things about, you know, where I came from around love. And I've talked a little bit about my parents, but my mom was someone who, she's been married 5 or 6 times, couple of times to the same person, and then divorced and then married again. And that's why I'm struggling to remember exactly how many times she's been married, but she's been married a lot of times. And the dynamic that I grew up in was my mom marrying really dysfunctional men, a lot of alcoholism, different forms of abuse and neglect in the home. And with my mom, it was always kind of like she was the one holding it all together. She would work 2 jobs while her unemployed husband was home drinking all day. And, you know, there were times when I wasn't around and I had 4 younger sisters, and my younger sisters were jumping on the trampoline by themselves while her drunk husband was passed out in the bedroom, and she was, you know, out all day at work, and just like, you know, cooking meals without supervision, and like just all this kind of stuff. Like, this was the environment I grew up in. So I didn't really have a healthy model of love. You know, my mother and my father were, I guess you could call them high school sweethearts. My father was a sophomore. My mom was a senior. I was 19, or she was 19 years old when I was born. My father was like 16, and he disappeared. So he actually left the state before I was even born. And my mom was a single mother, 19 years old. She went to college while I was a child, and, you know, she ended up getting a degree to be a school teacher. And, you know, my mom, she worked really hard, and she's made some mistakes. She hasn't done everything right, but she did her best to be a good mother. My father was completely absent. And I don't really know where this comes from. You know, something interesting about my mother, and sometimes I wonder like how deeply trauma sets in before we're even conscious, because my mother's mother, her biological mother, tried to suffocate her with a pillow in the hospital after she was born. And it's so interesting because, you know, my mom was rescued by one of the nurses there, and then she was taken from her biological mother's custody. She was put up for adoption. She was adopted by my grandparents, who by all signals were really, you know, healthy, well-adjusted people, kind, loving people. You know, they didn't have a perfect marriage. They weren't perfect people. I think the generation they were from, you know, my grandparents grew up during the Great Depression, so they didn't talk a lot about feelings and things like that. But, you know, like my mom had, it seems as far as I could tell, like healthy love modeled for her when she was younger. And I always wondered why she wasn't able to create that for herself. And sometimes I wonder if the trauma of like not being wanted by your own biological mother, like I wonder if that sets in that deep even as a newborn. And I don't know. This is all speculation, right? But I say all this to say that, my mom was never really able to figure out the love thing in her life. And even to this day, she's married now to someone that my sisters and I have had to distance ourselves from because of certain forms of abuse and things that are taking place. And we just said that we can't be a part of it. We can't pretend like this isn't happening. We can't act like we're okay with it when we're not. And so we've had to step back from all of this, and it's been, really painful for the whole family. But, that was what I had modeled to me growing up. I largely had a single mother who would have these marriages that lasted several years intermittently. And I was subjected to these men who were, honestly, just quite toxic, quite hurtful, harmful men. And really, I should say, like, wounded men, right? Not necessarily horrible people in and of themselves, but deeply wounded and didn't have the capacity to be the provider and protector that my mom and our family needed. And like I said, often devolving into alcoholism or different things like this. And then when I was 13, I started acting out a lot. Started acting out a lot as a kid because I think I've shared this on a previous episode, but my mom was very, very religious and very, very strict. And it was like, I think religion can be a beautiful thing in the right context, but with my mother, it was religion to the point of suffocation, to the point where I had no freedom to be myself. And I actually internalized something at a very young age, but I internalized that I was bad. Right? I was somehow bad. And this is, I think, my biggest takeaway from my childhood. And now I look back and I was like, I was actually a pretty good kid. Like, I did good in school. I maintained like almost straight A's for the most part. Even I started to act out a lot when I got to be like, preteen, teenager, and I got in a lot of trouble at school. But prior to that, I was a good kid at school. I played sports. I worked hard. I got good grades. I always did my homework. I was largely a good kid. But somehow I internalized that I was a bad kid. And the reason I internalized that was because my mom created this dichotomy in the household where her religion was opposed to everything I liked. Whether it was a television show or a game or, I remember like I was playing The Legend of Zelda, and a friend had introduced me to this game, and I thought like, this is the best game I've ever played. And I was so excited about it. And my mom did this thing where anytime I would get into something new, if it was a TV show or a band that I liked to listen to or a video game I wanted to play, my mom would do this thing where she'd be like, okay, well, let me sit down with you and we'll watch the show together, or we'll play the video game together, and I'll decide if it's appropriate or not. And as soon as she said that, I knew she was going to decide it wasn't appropriate. Like that was just what happened every time. She was never like, okay, this is appropriate. It was like, no, it was never appropriate. And so basically every time she said that, I knew that this thing was about to get taken away. And I remember Legend of Zelda. I was maybe 9 years old, and my friend had just let me borrow this game, and I was playing it. And my mom did her same thing. Okay, let's sit down and play it. And she said, no, it's too violent. I don't think you should play this. And I remember I had like this complete like outburst tantrum where I just like, I was crying and I was screaming. I was like, you take everything, you can't take this. And she finally conceded, and she said, fine, you can keep the game. Because I was relentless. I was like unwilling to have this be taken away on top of everything else. And she let me keep the game, actually. That was the one win I had in all my years of childhood. But, I say all this to say that I developed this internal idea that I was bad because in my mind as a child, my mom was good. She was the religious one. She was the one who loved God and wanted me to go to church and wanted me to be this good little Christian boy. And I was the one who always wanted everything other than that. And now looking back, I'm like, I was a normal kid who liked normal things. But at the time, and when we're a child, we don't have this frame of reference. I internalized the feeling that I was bad. And that's what I grew up feeling, that like I was a bad kid, even though I really wasn't. And so by the time I got to be like 11, 12, 13, I started actually being bad because I was like this is who I am, right? It just became part of my identity. I'm a bad kid, so I'm just going to be bad. And I started acting out a lot. I remember I stole a car when I was 13. I got pulled over. I didn't know how to, it was a stick shift and I didn't really know how to drive it. And I was like doing my best. And I come up on this hill and blew through a stop sign and actually like launched the car over the top of this hill. Like all four wheels were off the ground. Car slams down, boom. And then, I had ran a stop sign and, 30 seconds later, there are police lights behind me. And I'm like, shit. So I got pulled over, got arrested for that first time, 13 years old. That was just a fun little side story. But, I started acting out a lot in school, started getting in a lot of fights. I would get kicked out of class a lot. It got to the point, and this started to become my identity because I was tired of trying to be good. So I just said, I'm going to be bad. And like, it became my goal to get sent to the office once a day. And so I would act out in one of my classes every day to literally get kicked out of class and get sent to the office. And it was like a joke among me and my friends. Yeah, I go to the office every day. And anyway, I got a reputation at the school that I was the bad kid. I was the troublemaker. And I got in a lot of fights. And, most of them were fairly harmless, just me and my friends roughhousing. But there were a couple of kids in the school that I developed feuds with. And sometimes those feuds would escalate. And anyway, long story short, one of the feuds escalated to the point where it actually became a real problem. The kids' parents complained about me. I was once again in the office and I got kicked out of school. And I think my mom at this point was like at her wit's end with me. And I can see it from her perspective where she's like, I've done everything to try to make this kid a good kid. No matter what I do, he just gets worse and worse. He's acting out. He has poor behavior. Now he's gotten kicked out of school. And I see it from her perspective. She's like, I did everything I could to make him a good kid and he's still bad. I don't think even to this day, probably she hasn't connected the fact that I got to a point where I was just rebelling against the oppression. I don't think she ever really understood that's what happened. But long story short is she said, why don't you go live with your dad? And I had never even met my dad, right? I met him once when I was 5 years old. He came and visited for a few days. Only time I'd ever met my dad. But I had his phone number and we would occasionally talk on the phone. He lived in Florida. We lived in Arizona at the time. Complete opposite end of the country. I hadn't seen him since I was 5 years old. I was 13 now. And my mom says, why don't you go live with your dad? And I called him up. He didn't often answer, but he did answer this time. It was one of those like little miracles. And I said, Mom says I can come live with you. Is that okay? And he said, yeah, come on down. And he bought me a plane ticket and I went to live with my dad. Now, my dad was the exact opposite. He was an alcoholic to this day, still is an alcoholic, drug user. I mean, my dad would smoke weed daily. He would use cocaine occasionally. There were lots of like pill heads. And I mean, just my dad's house was like a frat house for 35-year-olds. Let's put it that way. Every weekend was a party. People would show up on Friday night with, 12 packs of beer and bottles of Captain Morgan, bags of weed, and, sometimes Coke, sometimes other things. And the party would go nonstop till Sunday night. And sometimes even on a Tuesday night, they'd throw a spontaneous party. This was just the environment I was living in. And I had never been exposed to this because I was like with my mom. We said prayers before every meal. We went to church every Sunday, right? So this was a shock for me. But it aligned perfectly with this identity that I had developed as the bad kid, and I threw myself into it completely. And where my mom had been kind of a doormat in relationships, where she would be with these toxic men and they would kind of walk all over her, my dad was maybe more the abuser. And, my dad's house was the kind of house where him and his girlfriend, that they had been together something like 13 or 14 years, and they'd they're not together now, but they were together for ultimately like 20 years or something like that. And they just had this like brutal relationship where they would get drunk, have these awful fights. They would break up and be back together within 24 hours. And they just move over it like nothing ever happened. But there was an incredible amount of resentment on both sides. I mean, it was like a love-hate relationship, right? They loved each other and they hated each other's guts. And they would get drunk regularly, and all of this resentment would come out when they were drunk. And I mean, I would literally wake up in the middle of the night hearing a lamp get smashed against the wall. And I mean, like, things getting broken was a regular occurrence in this house. It was kind of thing where my dad would, leave at 2 a.m. after they got in a fight to go get tacos. He wouldn't come home for 3 days. And then he would storm out and, he was going to get tacos, probably going to the strip club, going wherever he was going. I didn't even know where he went. And my stepmom would then come in and I'd be asleep in my bedroom and she'd start screaming at me, "You little motherfucker." And just, she took it out on me because he was gone. She couldn't take it out on him anymore. And these were my models for love. And I got to say, like, I don't know where this came from, but I was always kind of a romantic. And like, I think back even to being a young age, like even in my younger years, like I always had a girlfriend and like, we weren't any more than friends. I'm talking about like second grade, third grade, right? You have your little boyfriend, little girlfriend. We were just friends, but we had that love for each other. And I would always fantasize about like even my fifth grade girlfriend, like growing up and marrying her. And it was just like, I don't know if this came from Disney movies or I have no idea where it came from, but I always had that kind of romantic side to me. And maybe that's why I became a relationship coach, is because I love and I always have. And even at a young age, I think I somehow instinctually knew that like love is the juiciest, most exciting part of life. You can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have love, your life is empty. And I think that's a fundamental truth about life. And I think that's something I innately understood from a young age. And I always wanted love, but these were my models for love. And I think I got into what I would call my first real relationship when I was about 15. And there's a girl that I fell head over heels in love with her. And she, I think was head over heels in love with me, or at least, there's strong attraction there. And this was my first real relationship, right? I lost my virginity to her. We were together for about a year and it was a real relationship, right? Like I was welcomed into her family. I spent holidays with her. We made the whole thing. We're going to get married. We're going to spend our lives together. And, looking back, I was like, what a fool I was. I made her my life and to her, I was like the entertainment of the year. Right. And she was, God bless her. I don't want to say anything bad about her. She's a teenage girl. She didn't know any better, right? It's not her fault. We're actually friends on Facebook. And as far as I could tell, she's happily married now. Looks like she turned out to be a wonderful person. But she was a teenage girl and she had her own daddy issues and her own need for attention. And she was the kind of girl who, would date a new guy every year. And she was kind of always on to the next thing. And she was the kind of girl who, even while we were dating, she would like flirt with other boys and make me jealous. And I would end up threatening to beat someone's ass in the hallway at school. And she would like that, right? Like she would like get off on this. And it was just those kinds of games, she would maintain close relationships with all of her exes. And it was always like a point in our relationship where she'd, tell me something her ex said and make me jealous. And it was that kind of thing. Right. But I couldn't see it for what it was back then because I didn't have the intelligence or maturity to really know. And she was just a teenage girl just doing what she was doing. I can't blame her for it. She didn't know any better either. And we were just a couple of kids. But, say all this to say that after we'd been together for a little less than a year, she broke up with me. I found out that she had been, I don't know if she had physically cheated on me already. Likely she already had, but even if she hadn't, she was emotionally cheating on me with this mutual friend of ours. And 15 minutes after we broke up, she was with him, right? So she essentially left me to be with him. And I was oblivious to all of this. I knew they were hanging out and he would be over at her house when I was out doing my thing with my friends or whatever. And ironically, I was strangely secure with this whole situation. I guess I didn't see him as a threat. And then turns out he was a threat. And, maybe this was another thing where she was trying to make me jealous. And when I didn't bite on this one, she just went all the way with it. I don't know, right? It's all speculation at this point. But point is, one day she blindsided me and broke up with me. And this is where I say I'm, not proud of myself here, but I found myself on my hands and knees crying and begging her not to leave me. Perhaps my most shameful moment, right? I don't think I would ever do that again. And I was really broken at that time, I think. And, I was 16 years old and I had essentially been rejected by my own mother. She decided I was too bad and sent me away to live with a man that I didn't even know, that she didn't even know. She hadn't seen him since she was a teenager. And I had been, rejected, abandoned by my own mother. I had been sent to live in an environment with a really hostile father, hostile home environment, and it wasn't safe at all. And I latched onto this girl as the one good thing in my life. And I really remember, like, she was my salvation at that point. I'll call it that. And this was all my projection, right? Like, and honestly, unfair of me to put all of this on a 16-year-old girl, right? Like, it's like she had no capacity to hold what I was laying in her hands, but it was just what I did. I didn't know any better. And, I'd been, again, kind of disowned by my own mother, sent to live with my father, who was toxic and hostile and unstable. And his wife was the same way. And this environment was really, really unstable. And here I found this girl who loved me and I loved her. And we had what seemed like a good relationship, and we had made commitments to be together forever. And I believed in those commitments. And she was like the one ray of sunshine in my life in an otherwise dark and hostile and unsafe world. And I was welcomed into her family, and they were a relatively stable, loving family. And, her dad was kind of like a father figure to me. Her mom was like a mother figure to me. And when I lost her, I didn't only lose her, I lost the whole family. I lost this whole safe environment that I had found for myself. And it was devastating. It was devastating. It was something I thought I would have forever that was abruptly ripped away from me. And I didn't have the emotional awareness, the intelligence, the nervous system to be able to know what to do with this. And I remember that night I went home after, begging her not to leave me. And she eventually said, like, you've just got to go. Like, the answer's no, like, fucking leave already. And so I got on my bike and I rode home, and I told my dad what happened. And my dad actually, my dad was not an empathetic person, but he at least understood. He had had his heart broken a few times, and I think he got it. And my dad at that age didn't smoke weed with me often, but that night he's like, you want some weed? And he rolled up a joint, smoked a joint with me. And it would be a couple years until he would just regularly smoke weed with me on a daily basis, but we hadn't gotten there yet. But that night he did, and that was his solution, right? Numb the pain with chemicals. That was all I knew. And within a week or so, my dad was mocking me over it, and my stepmom was patronizing me over it. And it was a brutal, brutal heartbreak. It was so bad. And, I honestly say, like, I didn't recover from that for probably like 10 years, like till I was in my mid 20s. And it was only because of the amount of healing work I did throughout my 20s that I think I was able to recover from it at all. And, this is like, we tend to think of high school romance as, oh, it's just puppy love, or, well, like, we tend to minimize it. But I mean, let me say, this experience was not minimal. And maybe for other people it is not as serious, but this was like existential crisis for me. She was my only safe place in the world, and then I lost her. I didn't have my mother. My father wasn't safe. My stepmother wasn't safe. I was living in a home where I was like literally protecting myself all the time from this like abusive, hostile environment. And she was my refuge, and then I lost her. And that was the point where I really threw myself into drug addiction. And I ended up like completely getting involved with a new group of friends after that. My old friends, I kind of distanced myself from and started really getting connected to a new group of friends. And my old friends, we were kind of the, I don't know, what do you want to call it? The little gangsters in school, and we would sell drugs, and, we would do stuff like that. And, my new friends were like the party crowd, and they were all musicians, and I was a drummer. So we would play music together. And this is when I started taking ecstasy and LSD, and, ultimately led into my heavier drug addiction as the years went by. But it was like I completely changed after that breakup. And I think drugs became my refuge. And, like I said, I went home, I told my dad that she broke up with me. What did he do? He rolled up a joint, right? That was his only solution he could offer me. And that's what I learned, turn to substances to numb the pain. And some of us turn to substances. Some of us chase down another relationship. Some of us turn to porn. Some of us turn to, different kinds of dysfunction. But there are so many ways to numb ourselves, but that was mine. And, I'm sharing all of this because I really want to paint the blueprint that I developed around love, that I developed around relationships, right? Like this was my blueprint. This was what I learned about relationships. And even after all that, like I still wanted love. I still wanted love. I wanted to be in a relationship like the one I was in. But I didn't even realize how guarded I had become against it. And, I didn't even have another relationship till I was 21. There were a couple of little things that happened along the way. And I became like hyper avoidant, and like to the point where I would like go out on a couple dates with a girl and then I would just like ghost her or just completely like isolate because I just could not handle getting close to someone. And that was my relational pattern until I was like 21, when I somehow felt safe enough to try again. And at that age at 21, when I started trying again, I didn't end up in healthy relationships. So this was what I learned. And I shared a little bit about this in my previous diary entries, but I'll just share it here for anyone who maybe didn't catch those. Is, the next several years after that breakup were dominated by drugs. I was in a band, we were playing shows, and, we'd go around South Florida and play shows. And then I'd do a lot of drugs. Like I said, like I didn't even have sex with anyone else because I couldn't let myself get close to anyone on that level. I couldn't let anyone in like that. So I'd meet girls here and there, and I would just like distance myself from them and throw myself deeper into doing drugs. And it got to the point where I was 18 years old. My dad had kicked me out of the house. I was living in this little apartment in the hood, selling drugs. I was paranoid to the point where like I wouldn't even leave my apartment. I remember like friends would invite me, you want to go out and do this? You want to go out and do that? I was like, no, just come over and hang out. Like I didn't want to leave my apartment. I was like, my anxiety was so heightened and I was so paranoid that like I wouldn't even leave my apartment. My whole world was in that little ghetto apartment. And it's funny, I was so afraid to leave the apartment because I was so paranoid. And then the police came to my apartment to get me when I got arrested. And when I was 18 years old, it was 4 days before Christmas. I was involved in a situation at my house, an altercation with this guy who came over. It was basically a bad drug deal. And he called the police, and 15 minutes later, my house was surrounded by police and I was taken out of my house at gunpoint. Ended up doing 2 years in jail. And I find myself at 21 years old, having just done 2 years in jail. I'm finally released again, experiencing freedom for the first time. I did a lot of healing in jail. And for those of you who've heard my story, jail was where I first explored spirituality. Jail was where I learned to meditate, do yoga. I journaled for I would get like yellow legal pads off of the jail canteen, and I would just journal pages and pages and pages, and I would write songs and poetry. And it was like, I didn't really have any guidance. I didn't have a coach or a therapist or anything, but I was just healing myself. I was reading tons of books. I was just learning everything I could, and I would journal, I would write. There was so much catharsis, and I read books on meditation, and I learned to meditate, and I learned to do yoga, and I was doing all of this in jail. It was kind of like, despite it being jail, it was kind of like a monastery. Like it was my little period of isolation where I could get the drugs out of my system, be clear-headed for the first time. I would exercise a little bit, get my body into a healthy state. And that was what I did for those 2 years. And when I got out, I was 21 years old. I had nothing, no money, no family. My father had moved to Louisiana. Him and my stepmom had separated. She had moved a couple cities away and was now living with her sister. My mom, of course, was in Arizona where she had always been, and she was going through a separation with her husband at the time where she had to take my sisters and flee the state to get away from him. And I was completely alone. I reconnected with some friends who I had been in touch with before, and they were drinking and doing drugs. And I got back into that for a little bit, but I realized like I was on probation, and I was like, if I don't seriously change my life, I'm going to end up back in jail. And that was when I basically cut ties with all of my old friends, my whole world. I was completely alone, and I made new friends. I started going to AA. I started meeting people there, and I basically built my life up from nothing. But I want to paint this picture, and the reason I want to paint this picture is because I said earlier, like I was the least likely to succeed, and I really want you to understand that I was the least likely to succeed. You know, here I am, 21 years old. I've got no money, no family, nothing to show for my life up until this point, which I know most 21-year-olds don't, and that's fine. But I was short, right? So I wasn't even like I'm 5'4", so I was like, you know, the kind of guy that women didn't really pay attention to. On top of that, I was an ex-convict, and like I just didn't have anything going for me. And I've gone from there to today. I'm married to the love of my life. We have a beautiful daughter. We have a beautiful home. We have 2 of the most beautiful little dogs that you've ever seen in your whole life. I have peace in my life today. I have a career that I'm passionate about, right? I spent years working dead-end jobs. You know, when I got out of jail, I was doing a pool service, cleaning swimming pools for $8 an hour, and I'd work 60 hours a week, right? Like I've gone from dead-end jobs, dead-end relationships, being completely undesirable, having nothing to offer in the dating pool, to where I am today. A life of peace and purpose and passion, married to the love of my life, have a beautiful, healthy relationship. And I don't say that to brag, but I say that to inspire, because, you know, if I could do it, anybody could do it, right? Like it's simply a matter of choosing to do the next right thing today, and the day after that, and the day after that, and the day after that, and the day after that. And so let's say I was 21 when I got out of jail and started my life over, and I was 26 when I met my wife. So it's 5 years. And I was not a finished product by the time I met my wife, in any sense of the word. I've, you know, just continued to grow, and we've been together almost 10 years now. I've just continued to grow and continued to get better as I've grown in our relationship together. But I got to a point where someone of value would actually want something to do with me. And I want to share a little bit about what that journey was like, because, you know, I want to say, if you're listening to this podcast right now, you are already light years ahead of where I started. So let's start there, right? And maybe you're in a situation right now where you want a deeper level of relationship. You want a deeper level of connection. You want to find a partner that you really resonate with on a deep level, and someone that you can share your heart with, someone you can connect deeply with. And maybe you're like me in that you've had kind of a fucked up blueprint for love. Maybe you weren't really taught about secure love, and maybe your nervous system doesn't know how to hold it. And you know, you may have all different forms of this going on, just like I did. And, you know, like when I met my wife, let me put it this way. I wasn't completely healed by any means. when I was with my wife, I experienced an incredible amount of insecurity for maybe the first couple of years. You know, here was a woman who was clearly a high value woman. She was giving me a chance. I was afraid, like, we were long distance. I've shared this before. And, you know, there was a 3-hour distance between us on a plane. And I was trying to figure out how to afford to be able to take plane rides to go see her and all of this. And she was doing the same on her end. And we were adjusting our lives to try to be available for this relationship and make it work with each other. And, you know, my biggest fear at the time was that she was going to lose interest in the relationship, that she was just going to be like, it's too hard. He's not worth it. And, you know, she's just going to lose interest. And that wasn't an unfounded fear. Like that literally did happen to a degree. We would be apart for several weeks at a time. And, you know, she would get caught up in her life. I would get caught up in my life. The relationship would seem far away. We'd start to have conversations like, this is just too hard. I just can't do this anymore. And I would like really fear losing her. And this is where I came face to face with like all of my patterns, my insecurity. Like, you know, I had come a long way. And, you know, let me just say, I had spent this 5 years in deep personal transformation, starting with AA and moving on to deeper levels of transformation. I had life coaches, and I was getting constantly coached for all of these years. I was relentless about it. I was turning myself inside out to try to become a better human being. And I carried a lot of shame about my past. And this is something I've actually healed in more recent years, has been willing to embrace my past more, because at the time I just wanted to get rid of all of it. My addiction years, my jail time, my selling drugs. I just wanted to like exile all of it, like it didn't exist. And I wanted to be a attractive, productive member of society and just put all that behind me. And that's kind of where I was when I met my wife, is I was trying to exile my past and be this new person. And it's actually something in recent years, and maybe it has a lot to do with the fact that she's unconditionally loved me as I am, that I've been able to accept those parts of myself. But throughout these years, you know, I had been doing a lot. And I remember I got involved with this married woman. I'm sure I've shared this story before on the podcast, but I got involved with this married woman, and this was a super transformational experience for me for a couple of reasons. One was, she was the kind of woman that I thought, like, wow, in my ideal world, this is the kind of woman I'd want to be with. And let me say, like, this is how funny it is. My wife blows her away in every possible sense of the word, right? So it's like, it's so funny how at the time I'm like, this is the kind of person that would be my ideal. This is the kind of person that I truly, truly want to be with. And now looking at the relationship I have today, it's like, wow, my wife is so much better person than she was. But at the time, it was all I had a frame of reference for. And so I couldn't believe that someone like this wanted me. That was the first part of it. The second part of it was my ability to walk away from something like that, because even though she was amazing, I didn't want to be with someone who was married. So I got to solidify my own standards. And that was super, super transformative of me. And I remember I was on a coaching call with one of my coaches. Like I said, I had constant coaching through this. And it was actually coaching that led me to decide to let this relationship go, because what my coaches led me to was like, this relationship isn't in integrity. And when you find the right partner, don't you want it to be a partnership that has integrity? And I ultimately got to a place within myself where I was like, it doesn't matter how great she is. It doesn't matter how much I like her. This relationship has no integrity, and I need a relationship that has integrity. And like, all in all, me and her were together for maybe a couple of months. We had this like secret relationship where we would meet late at night or in the middle of the afternoon when she was supposed to be at work, and we would have like these secret rendezvous and these text messages back and forth. And it was like this really exciting secret kind of thing that we were doing. And I remember feeling like in between these like secret meetings we would have, she would like blow me off. And I remember I was talking to one of my coaches, and I was like, why won't she take me seriously? And my coach said to me, she's only reflecting how you feel about yourself. Why don't you take yourself seriously? And the truth is that had I taken myself seriously, I never would have stooped low enough to be in this relationship. But what happened for me was I met someone who I thought was the cat's meow. I thought she was like, most amazing woman. And I said, if I can be with a woman like this, my integrity doesn't matter. My values don't matter. How I feel, none of that matters. I'll sacrifice all of that in order to be with a woman like this. And I think a lot of us do that. A lot of us do that. We find someone who is what we think we want, what we think is, the kind of partner that we want to be with, and we sacrifice ourselves. And they may not always be married. It may not always be a situation of infidelity, but we sacrifice our worthiness and our values and our sense of self, our principles, the things that matter to us most, to try to make it work with that person. And you see, what I was doing at that time was my sense of self was so low that I thought I could make up for my sense of self by partnering with someone who I saw as valuable. And so my integrity really didn't matter because she was going to make up for that. If she liked me, if she wanted me, if we were going to be together, then she would make up for the fact that I had a very low sense of self. And this is one thing I'll say. One thing I give myself credit for was I learned quickly. And I honestly, I'll attribute it to this. I learned quickly because I was subjecting myself to constant coaching. I was constantly getting feedback on my life and my choices and my thoughts and my behaviors from people that were ahead of me in life, and they respected, I respected where they were. I looked up to them, and I wanted to make choices that were in alignment with the way they saw the world. And let me just put it this way. At that time, my frame was too wounded. I needed their frame because my frame wasn't clear enough. So at the time, I was involved with someone who I was sacrificing my dignity to try to have a relationship with her. And my coach said to me, do you want a relationship that's in integrity or not? And I realized that I had to let it go. That's not a conclusion I would have come to had I not had that feedback, had I not had that insight. And by the way, I just want to say these are the kinds of conversations that we have in my Inspired Love coaching circle, right? It's not always about infidelity. It's rare to almost never happens that I have someone in my group dating a married person. Most of the people in my group are far beyond that. But these are the kinds of nuances that we address. And what it comes down to is we have to choose ourselves over any relationship that we might be in. And by consistently choosing ourselves, never sacrificing my dignity, my integrity, my self-worth, my dreams in order to keep somebody else in my life, that I align with a relationship that is truly my ideal. And I think when I met my wife, the reason I was able to see her as the kind of partner I wanted to be with was because I had done so much work leading up to that. I had walked away from so many relationships that I really, really wanted to be in. But I walked away from these relationships because I realized that there was something that did not align with my values. And I want to share this for anyone who's maybe in this situation, or if you've been in this situation. The biggest trap that I see people falling into is making the same mistakes more than once and making them over and over and over again and staying in a relationship for too long. And so I said earlier that it was about 5 years from the time I started my life over till the time I met my wife. Now, that's a really short period of time. 5 years that I was relentlessly throwing myself into healing work. 5 years that I was relentlessly getting coaching. 5 years that I was relentlessly putting every area of my life under a microscope and refining like every detail that I could. And remember, I was least likely to succeed, right? And so I believe that, if you're in a situation right now where you're probably not starting at the level that I was, right? You're probably not least likely to succeed. You're probably somewhere in the middle. You're probably further ahead of where I was when I started. But I want to ask you, like, what if you right now decided to put every area of your life under a microscope, to be relentless about your choices, to get coaching and feedback from someone who has created the things that you want to create in your life? And let's just, for simplicity purpose, let's talk about a relationship. If you're in a place where you want a deeply loving, committed, long-term relationship, that's where you are right now. And maybe you've been trying, you've been dating, you've been in and out of relationships, you've been on dating apps, you've been doing all the things, but nothing's really paying off. Let's say you're ahead of where I was, so it's probably not going to take you 5 years. Let's say it takes you 2 years. Let's say it doesn't even take that long. A lot of ladies in my program, they come in and are in a deeply loving relationship within a few months. And sometimes it takes longer. And there's no judgment. We're all in different places, and wherever we start, sometimes it takes a little bit longer. But if you were to relentlessly hold yourself to a standard, get constant feedback and coaching, what might shift for you if you were just willing to hold yourself to that standard and be relentless about it? Because I want to share this too. When I walked away from that relationship with a married woman, it was not easy. I experienced probably the second deepest heartbreak of my life, second to the one I shared about in high school. And I didn't get on my hands and knees and beg this person to stay. No, it wasn't like that at all. It was pretty mutual. We called it off because it wasn't what I wanted, and she was having problems in her marriage, and she was afraid he was going to find out, and we were like, we got to stop this. But I was single for about a year after that, and I deeply grieved that relationship. I just sat in my car listening to heartbreak music, and just I went through all the things, why wasn't I good enough? Even though it's kind of obvious, right? It wasn't about me not being good enough. It was about the fact that she was married and it was out of integrity. But this is what our mind does, right? It's why wasn't I good enough for her? That if I had been enough, it would have worked out somehow. It's no, it never would have fucking worked out. It was broken from the time it started. And this relationship only lasted a couple months, and yet I grieved it for a year. How does that make any sense? Well, emotions are not logical. They're visceral. They live in the body. Grief takes time. And, I had grieved other relationships quicker, but why did I grieve this relationship for so long? Well, because she was the ideal. But that grief wasn't wasted time. That was the time where I was processing deep emotional wounds that I had never processed, maybe since my high school breakup. right? Like there were things living in my body that I had never dealt with. When I was saying, why wasn't I good enough for her? Maybe what I was really saying was, why wasn't I good enough for my high school girlfriend? Why did she leave me? Or maybe, why wasn't I good enough for my mom? Why wasn't being a straight A student and doing all my homework and going to church on Sundays, like, why wasn't that enough? Why wasn't I ever good enough for my mom? Why did she always want more from me than I could give? Right? Like, how far back does it go? At what point does the wound get entrenched? And now here I am in my mid-20s. I meet this married woman who I think is the cat's meow. And what she was the catalyst for me to completely reorient my value system. For me to get clear about what I deserve. For me to spend a year in my darkness dealing with the parts of myself that I had exiled and never wanted to face again. And after about a year of being in deep grief around this relationship, I met someone else. Second to my wife, healthiest relationship I ever had in my life. And here's this woman, great woman. To this day, I got nothing but respect for her. She was a single mother, hard worker, loved her daughter, took care of her daughter. We had a great relationship in a lot of ways. But there were some things in that relationship, and they were so subtle that I couldn't even name it at the time. Like, it's only in retrospect that I see, but I think it's important to share this because this really highlights how much I had grown through that previous relationship, how much that year of grief had really landed in me. Because here I am, I'm with this beautiful, smart, intelligent woman. I had mad respect for her. She's a phenomenal human being. But there were elements of the relationship where our values were not aligned. And we were together for about a year and a half. As I said, healthiest relationship second to my wife that I've ever had. But there were things that came up again and again and again and again and again. Things that I felt like I wasn't being heard on. Places where I felt like I wasn't really being respected. And it was the kind of thing that logically I couldn't make sense of at the time, but it lived in my body. The truth lived in my body. And it got to the point where my intuition was so strong that I had to leave this relationship, even though I couldn't logically make sense of it. And I just want to give a few examples here. Because, at the time I was strongly invested in this career path that ended up being highly successful for me and got me on track to even do what I'm doing now. But at the time I was on this career path and I was investing a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money. I was going all in with this career path. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to become one of the trainers and facilitators for this personal development seminar company. And I ended up succeeding. I ended up spending the second half of my 20s traveling around the country, delivering these amazing trainings. And it was deeply fulfilling, deeply rewarding. It got me set up financially in my life. It was a huge win on every level. But she was with me when I was in the early stages of doing this. And she always had this kind of cynical attitude about it. Like, I don't think this is going to work out for you. And I'd say, why don't you believe in me? And she'd say, it's not that I don't believe in you. I don't believe in the company. I don't think this is going to work. I don't think they're really going to hire you. And but like, she didn't really support my dream. And I could feel the weight of that in our relationship. And I could feel the conflict that created in our relationship. Because she was always subtly antagonistic to the thing that I was putting everything into. And then there were other issues too that came up again and again and again. I remember this guy who was somebody she loosely knew, a family friend or something like that. But he's like, hey, I want to take you out on my boat. And just the two of us. We'll go out on my boat. We'll cook some food. We'll go snorkeling. And so this guy's going to have you out on his boat alone. You're going to be in your bathing suit. You're going to be like snorkeling with him. You're going to be like cooking food. And she's like, it's just a friendship. And I don't feel like I should have to say no to things that I want to do just because I'm in a relationship. And she's like, I should be free to do what I want. And this relationship shouldn't be a restriction. And like, let me be clear, like these are all kind of my values, right? Like, I'm like, well, that's fair. Like I get that, but there was something that didn't feel right to me about it. And what I said to her was this, I said, I don't want to restrict you. I don't want to restrict your freedom. I don't want to tell you what you can and can't do or who you can and can't hang out with. But this man is clearly asking you on a date and you're saying yes to it. And to me, that feels disrespectful to our relationship, because if someone asks you out on a date and you go on a date with that person, now you're basically leading them to believe that you're available for something. And she's like, well, I would never cheat on you. And I'm like, I don't think you would cheat on me, but I think he might think you would cheat on me. And I think you're encouraging that belief in him. And that feels like a disrespect to me. We got in a huge fight about this and we couldn't see eye to eye on it. And at the end of the day, she went on the thing anyway. And I ended up forgiving her for it. And she told me she wasn't going to see him after that. And I said, okay. And we moved on from it. But it never really sat right with me. Then she ended up going to visit her family in Colombia. And while she was there, she would go out dancing and partying all night till like 3 a.m. And, I was generally okay with that, although I was a little worried, like, I didn't know who she was with or what she was doing, but I was, I didn't want to restrict her from going out and partying with her friends in Colombia that she hadn't seen in forever. But then she tells me that she stayed the night at this guy's house, a guy that she had previously had a sexual relationship with when she lived in Colombia. And she's like, but we're just friends and nothing happened and I wouldn't cheat on you and why don't you trust me? But again, this didn't sit right with me. And to this day, I don't know if she cheated on me or not. I have no real evidence. Like, she gave me her word. I could take her at her word. But these things never sat right with me because it felt like I was being subtly disrespected in the relationship. Like it doesn't matter if you cheated on me or not. What matters is you're putting yourself in these positions with other men that feels like you're not honoring the union that we have. And we would get in fights about this stuff. And this was a behavior pattern for her. And so there were these subtle things. And at the time, like I was also gaslighting myself. I'm like, well, why am I so jealous? Why don't I trust her? I should be able to trust her. Like she's never given me a reason not to. And so at the time, I couldn't even logically make sense of why I would want to leave her. When aside from these kinds of instances I'm describing, everything was good. But at the end of the day, it got to the point where I felt so strongly in my body that I could not physically remain in this relationship anymore. And so I left. Shortly after that, I got involved with a woman who wanted an open relationship. And again, like it's funny how like we can gaslight ourselves because she's speaking to my principles. Like she's like, love should be free. We shouldn't have to, close off connection with people because we're in a relationship with someone. We should be able to be in a relationship and still be available to love wherever it comes. And I'm like, well, I don't necessarily disagree with that philosophically. Practically in a relationship, it can cause a lot of problems, but I hear you. And I'm a spiritual, open-minded person. And, so I wanted to give it a shot. I wanted to be open to it. But again, it was like physically in my body, this did not feel right to me. And I think what had happened between the years I spent in jail, getting my system cleaned out, learning to meditate, learning to do yoga, and the years I spent in AA, like really taking inventory of every aspect of myself and really like naming my shadow and my darkness and like owning it and taking responsibility for it. And the years that I spent in like coaching and transformational programs and doing like deep cathartic somatic work, And the years that I spent like putting every area of my life under a microscope and getting feedback from coaches that I really looked up to and respected. And like all of the years that I've been so deeply immersed in this developed a sense of clarity in my body that I could feel deeply what was right and what was wrong, even if it didn't logically make sense. And I learned to trust that deep feeling. And the same feeling that said, I need to break up with this married woman. I need to break up with this woman who, largely is the best relationship I've ever had, but there's something that doesn't feel right here, and I need to honor that. From the woman who wanted an open relationship, and I was like, no, this doesn't work for me. Like, I don't want that kind of relationship. I want to know where I stand with someone and feel the security of that commitment. And I kept choosing myself in each of these situations. It's so interesting. The same way I felt I needed to end all of those previous relationships was the same thing I felt with my wife very early on in our relationship, that I said, this is right. This is the kind of person I want to be with. And it wasn't like I made a pros and cons sheet and I mapped it all out and I was like, okay, well, these are the reasons she's good. It wasn't a logical process. It was a deeply felt intuitive process that I knew this is the woman I want to marry. Simple as that. And as the years go by, it just blows my mind how like we just become more and more perfect for each other. But when I was younger, my system was too dysregulated to be able to have that kind of clarity. When I was younger, my system was so dysregulated that I was attracted to pain. And I was attracted to relationships that hurt me. I often say, if I had met my wife when I was younger, I would have walked away from her. And she would have walked away from me because we wouldn't have been compatible. And my wife, in her own way, her own journey, she did a lot of her own work, and she felt the same way about me. Even though the mind questioned it, even though it's too far, it's too hard, we're long distance, where is this going? How could this ever work? And there was a lot of drama around that, but we would keep coming back together. We would keep talking about it. We would keep finding our way back to each other. And I remember I said to my wife on a few occasions, because she was really struggling and questioning the relationship. And I said to her, I said, you can choose whatever you want. If you want to end this, then you can end it. But I'm not going to be the one who does it, because I believe this is right and I believe you're the person I want to be with. I was so clear about that. And I just held that space, and she came back. One day she'd say, like, I can't do this anymore. I think we need to break up. Then she'd call me back the next day and say, I think I was overreacting. I think I want to give this another chance. And what I really want to presence here, and what I really hope that you're gathering from this conversation, is that a couple of things. First, I'll go back to something I said in the beginning. One, you're not that far away from all of your dreams coming true. And maybe right now, maybe you're going through a breakup. Maybe you've been dating for a long time and you've been repeating the cycles, and you've been, getting connected and then losing the connection, or getting ghosted, or maybe you're on dating apps and you're just defeated and frustrated by it. Maybe you recently ended something with someone and you're feeling the grief of that. Maybe you've given up altogether. Maybe you stopped dating because it just feels too heavy and too much pressure, and you just don't want to deal with it. But whatever it is, wherever you are right now, I want to say this: you are not that far from everything you want to have. Maybe a few months, maybe a few years of really seriously doing the work. But I say this with a lot of love and compassion. I don't buy people's excuses anymore, because I know where I came from. I know how unlikely to succeed I was. You know, there are these communities of men who they are self-proclaimed incels, and they basically have decided that no woman would want to be with them, and they've decided they have no value in the dating pool. And I'm like, you know, I could have been one of those guys. I was the prime candidate to become one of those guys. And there are a lot of them out there. It's a major conversation right now. I was a prime candidate to become one of those guys. Ex-convict, no money, no education, young, short, on a bad track in life. Like I was a prime candidate to become one of those guys. How did I end up here? And it's through the relentless work that I did to develop myself. You know, I see a lot of the women that I work with and a lot of women in my community who are hanging on to relationships that they've already decided, they've already named are not healthy for them, but they can't let them go. And I know what that feels like because I was there. I know what it feels like to be with someone and to think, oh my God, they're everything I want. If I could just fix them or change them or make it be just a little bit different, it would be wonderful. Or when it's good, it's good. And when it's bad, it's bad. But if I could just find a way to make it good again. And I look at these women and I say, my God, girl, like if you could just really see how amazing you are and how worthy you are, and you could start to carry yourself with the energy of that. You would walk away from this guy in a heartbeat. And I had to learn that, right? Like I had to go through that. I had to learn that myself. How to walk away from someone when it's the best relationship I've ever had in my life. How to believe that there could be something better when I didn't even think I could get this. That's a hard lesson. And this isn't something that you can think yourself into. It's something that happens in your body. It's like when you clear away the wounded impressions that are keeping you stuck, the wounded impressions in your body that are magnetically drawing you to relationships that reflect your pain. I wish I could help people understand how real this is. Attraction is not a mental process. It is a physical process. We call it physical attraction because we feel it in our body. And until you clear away the physical somatic impressions that are attracting you to pain, you will constantly seek out and stay in these relationships. Or you'll just get so tired of hurting that you avoid it altogether. You just sit at home with your dog and your Netflix. But when you clear that up and you can really feel into what feels safe, what feels whole for you. I can't explain how I knew my wife was the one. There was something I felt, something that was so real. It wasn't the kind of anxiety that I normally felt around relationships. It wasn't the deep desire or need that I normally felt around relationships. It was simple and it was clean and it was clear and it was beautiful and it was safe. It was different than anything I had ever experienced before. A lot of people say this. They're like, when you meet the right one, you'll know. And I think that's true based on what I'm sharing now, but I think a lot of people misunderstand that because a lot of people think they know when they're experiencing that intense, chaotic kind of sick attraction that we have when we're not healed. And they're two different things, but until you experience the second one, you'll always confuse it for the first. But I want to say this. No matter where you are right now, you're not that far away. That's the good news. That's the good news. You can start right here. Like, new moment. There's a quote from the movie Vanilla Sky that I love the movie. And There's a quote that I heard in that movie that always stuck with me. Is like, every passing moment is another opportunity to turn it all around. I tell myself that all the time. Whenever I feel insecure about something in my business or something I'm struggling with in my life, I just tell myself every passing moment is another opportunity to turn it all around. If I make a new choice in this moment, and I make a new choice in the next moment, and in the moment after that, and the moment after that, and I just keep making a new, better choice in every single moment, my life is going to reflect those new, better choices. And me starting from 0 was like 5 years. If you're starting from 7 or 8, maybe it's a year, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 3 months. Like, you're not that far away. That's really what I want everybody to hear. You are not that far away. And I also want to say that I never could have done it alone. I've shared many times today that, I had sponsors in AA. I had several sponsors. I had coaches, people that I worked with relentlessly, people that I revealed myself to and got honest with, and they could help me see my blind spots, and they could help me name the things that I didn't know how to name for myself. They gave me a lifeline to hold on to when I had to make those big choices that I was terrified to make. And they were there on my team in my ear and saying, it's going to be okay. Make that choice. It's going to be okay. When I walked away from the best relationship I had ever had in my life because intuitively it didn't feel right in my body, and I didn't know if I was ever going to find something like that again, I had a coach in my ear saying, you're doing the right thing. Trust. You're not alone in this. And so the last thing I want to say today is I want to invite the same for you. One, I hope that wherever you are today, that you can find a next right step and just keep choosing that for yourself. Remember, every passing moment is another opportunity to turn it all around. What are you doing with this moment? What are you doing with the next moment? Are you allowing an old pattern to continue, or are you making one small choice that can change it? And now I want to invite you to not do it alone. You don't have to do this alone. And so if you hear this message and you know you're tired of doing it alone and you want the support of a coach, but not just the support of a coach, the support of a community, the guidance to healing, where I've taken the decades that I've been in this work and I've condensed it into a simple process that you can get hands-on guidance through. If you want to heal, you can feel the weight that you're carrying in your body, but you don't know how to heal it. You don't know how to let it go. Well, I've got that covered for you. That's what we do in the Inspired Love curriculum. I've got an 8-week curriculum that can teach you how to heal these impressions in your body. I offer the hands-on guidance and support you need to identify these blind spots in your own life and the safety and encouragement to make the tough choices even when it's hard to do so. I've got a loving community that will stand beside you every step of the way, that will encourage you and cheer you on as you're making those tough choices, as you're walking away from the things that don't serve you and stepping into the things that do. We've got it all. We've got it all here. And if you feel the weight of this in your body, if you don't know exactly what to do about it, if you're tired of doing it alone, if you can feel the truth and that, like, it's just a matter of making some new choices and continuing to make them, but you don't know exactly what those choices are or even exactly where to start, I've got that covered. You're not alone in this. You don't have to do it alone. And I want to invite you to be part of this Inspired Love community. A loving, supportive community that's growth focused, that will always hold you to your highest good. You'll get the hands-on personalized guidance, support, and coaching that you need to do whatever is right for you right now. You'll get the actual practices and the curriculum that is going to give you the tools you need. The same thing I did when I spent years going through personal development seminars and doing deep cathartic and somatic work. And I've taken all of that and condensed it into a process that you can do in 8 weeks. Whatever your dream is, whatever that love that you're seeking, that partnership, that depth, that passion, that connection, it's not that far away. And this right now, this moment right now is a passing moment that you could choose to turn it all around. And if you want to choose to turn it all around, I would just love to be a part of that with you. I'd love to have my community be a part of that with you. And I'd love to just lift you up and support you every step of that journey. So if you know that you want to take the step, if you feel called to that, I'm going to leave the link to book your intro call for Inspired Love in the show notes, wherever you're listening to this podcast. So make sure to check that out, click the link, and book your intro call with us. We'll get on a call with you. We'll tell you about the program, break down all the details, let you know how it can support you. And then if you want to do it, move forward. If not, that's fine too. But do something today. Do something today. Make one choice in some way to turn it all around. And if you don't know what choice to make, then book the call. That's the choice you can make right now. I want to thank you for being with me today. I hope as I share these diary entries, it continues to inspire you. I hope that as I give you a glimpse at not just the advice I offer, but where that advice is coming from, the lived experience that has given me the wisdom that I have around these topics. I hope that that lets you know that, I'm just like everyone else, just someone who was once the least likely to succeed, but I found a way to. And now I continue succeeding in my life. Not because I'm perfect, not because I don't make mistakes, not because I have all the answers, but because I keep growing every day and I keep making that next right choice. Sometimes I make wrong ones, then I correct them and I start making the right choices again. So thank you everybody for being with me today. Lots of love and blessings. I hope to speak with some of you soon in the Inspired Love program. And aside from that, I hope you find everything you're looking for. I hope you know that whatever you're seeking is seeking you. And I'll see you back here next week. Lots of love. Bye. Thanks again for checking out the show. Please subscribe on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on the most. And I would love it so much if you leave a review and tell people what you think of us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @TheLivingRelationship to connect more closely. And I'm grateful to be supporting you on your journey to love.